Welcome to a look back in time with yours truly, Audrey Hibler. Today, we'll be exploring the beautiful world of cannabis in the ancient times throughout Egypt, China, and Greece. So let's begin. We're going to begin with exploring ancient Egypt. Ancient Egyptians had over 2,000 gods and goddesses that were worshipped. The ancient Egyptian culture had makeup, pyramids, equal rights for women, and many more things that show the complexity of the ancient Egyptian culture. One of the ancient Egyptian specialties is their skills with medicine. It is stated how the focus of medicine in ancient Egypt was to drive evil from the body, and one way to drive evil from the body was believed to be the cannabis plant. An example of how it was specifically used was ointment for a fever. Another great example of the importance of cannabis in ancient Egypt is shown through the papyrus in Cannabis in Ancient Egypt, which was written by Venice Abraham Attia. This shows that cannabis was used in the production of fabric and medicine in ancient Egypt. It also had some various uses in religion. It was documented throughout many different papyrus documents that show the use of cannabis at this time. The final item I will be discussing with you all from Egypt is the Ebers Papyrus. This is a document that was written in 1550 BCE, and it shows how cannabis was used in medical situations in ancient Egypt. Some examples of this were the use of cannabis to help inflammation in the body and the use of cannabis for contractions from having a baby. Now that you all know a little bit more about the history of cannabis in ancient Egypt, let's talk about another fascinating civilization that used cannabis. This civilization is ancient China. The ancient Chinese used cannabis in different ways in their culture that led them to where they currently are. First, let's learn a little bit about ancient China. There were three main dynasties: lots of art and culture, social constructs, and much more that add to a complex culture. China used cannabis in many ways, such as for fiber, food, and medicine. They also had a great understanding of the different types of cannabis, such as CBD and THC, and how these differed from one another. Understanding what these are helps understand the plant itself. Cannabis as a plant has many properties, and these properties make it useful in different situations. So knowing ancient China had knowledge of the plant's anatomy leads me to believe they were educated on the plant. Cannabis was also found in ancient Chinese tombs. Many different educators wrote the book Ancient Cannabis Burial Shroud in a Central Eurasian Cemetery, and it discusses how the remains of cannabis were found in a tomb in Jiaying Cemetery in Turpan, northwest China. This shows how cannabis was used throughout multiple facets of Chinese life and culture. Another example is of cannabis found in tombs in Jiaxing, China. There is evidence from a shaman that informed people to believe that cannabis was used for medicine and rituals because it was found at the burial in a bowl. Another example of cannabis used in burials is dated over 2,000 years ago by 8 different professors from the Department of Archaeology and Anthropology at the University of Chinese Academy of Sciences in Beijing. They state that a burial shroud had almost 13 whole plants of cannabis, and there was a pattern arranged around the body of cannabis. This shows it was used in burials and possibly rituals in ancient China. Lastly, for China, let's look at an artifact used almost 2,500 years ago. This is a wooden incense burner called a brazier that had high traces of cannabis residue in it. It was found in the Zhizhenkou Cemetery in western China. This artifact informs us that cannabis was used in a recreational sense as well as a medical sense. All these examples prove the intelligence and creativity of ancient Chinese culture. Our final ancient society we will be exploring together is ancient Greece. Ancient Greece had multiple different views on cannabis and was used in many different forms. At certain points, it was illegal, but not strictly enforced. At other times, it was allowed and used frequently in public, and it played an important role on how you were viewed in society. Aside from cannabis being used recreationally, it was used as a fiber, medicine, and used in religion in ancient Greece. Professor James Petruccia, who works for the Department of Classics at the Memorial University of Newfoundland in St. John's, Newfoundland, Canada, writes, "The medical use of cannabis among the Greeks and Romans." This article discusses how cannabis was used to treat horses and their wounds, or how it was used on humans for nosebleeds, tapeworms, and most commonly, it was steeped in a liquid, then the liquid was put in the ear to help with blockages. It was also used as a fiber to make rope and cloth, along with other material items used day to day. However, the first recording of Greek use of cannabis was from inhaling the smoke for recreational purposes. One of the most important uses of cannabis was medically. Ethan Russo states in Hemp for Headache that cannabis was used to treat headaches and pain throughout inhaling the vapor. This shows the use of cannabis and vapors in ancient Greek society. Finally, let's look at an artifact from ancient Greece. This is an ancient Roman floor mosaic that is currently in the Antonio Salinas Regional Archaeological Museum that represents Orpheus surrounded by animals and herbs. This floor mosaic was made in 325 AD and represents what a wealthy family may have been able to afford. These three uniquely beautiful and complex societies all used cannabis in different forms, but the methods all remained similar to one another. Cannabis was a tool that people used to help start the creative societies we live in now, and cannabis is still used to this day. I hope you turn in next week as we discuss how cannabis played a role in ancient European societies. Signing off, Audrey Hibler.